as you walked into the room, you hopefully noticed a difference in the atmosphere. It's a pretty nice day out, so it's not as apparent as some days. But when you walk into this room, you're walking into a controlled atmosphere, and it's that way 24/7, year-round. And what it is, it's the middle of the known guitar playing world in temperature and humidity. So it's midway between the extremes. Let's say Stockholm, Sweden in the winter where there's no moisture in the air, to Singapore where it's really humid all the time. And in those extremes, the guitar top can shrink about 3/8 of an inch. And that's enough to separate it at its weakest point. It's usually not a joint either. It's usually a crack in the body of the wood. Or in a humid atmosphere, it'll swell to where it doesn't sound good and it affects the action. It's just not pleasant to play. So by building in the middle, we can go both directions, the broadest bandwidth of comfort for the guitar. Processing the wood is equally important for stability of the guitar. It's only one factor. Our business model was never a business model. It was how to support a guitar making habit. And therefore we did it all backwards. It's reverse engineered. We want to make the best guitar we possibly can because that makes it fun, and then find ways to support that habit by talking people into buying them. So when it comes to acquiring wood, we don't have the usual boundaries and constraints that a prudent business would by, okay, here's our price target, so we spend this much for wood and this much for labor. We go, okay, here's our quality target, what does it take? Okay, so where that comes from in the wood is we simply want the most resonant wood possible, and we want it to know it's responsibly harvested. Not only hear that, but we want to verify that. So the woods that I'll talk about here, we know where they've come from all the way to the beginning, the source, and we've chosen them because they have the potential for excellent resonance, and we'll verify that. So here's a beautiful thing. You can get both of those things, responsible harvest and the most resonant possible wood, when you use wood that's removed from the living tree. The longer the better. Matte Sinker redwood has the advantage of the same trick that the Italian masters used in preparing their wood for their instruments and the violins for resonance. And what that was they sunk them underwater. They're spruces and maples. And what happened in that time, let's say up to a generation in that condition, the polymerization of the resins happens independent of moisture. So you can't dry it hard, and it hardens in water. But another thing happens underwater, which is the sugars, the nutrients that are all the way through the cellular structure, when you arrest the growth or the living part of the tree, they're stuck in there, and underwater they'll dissolve and wash out. So you mean this nice, clean, clear, resonant stuff, and the resins that you're not getting out of the wood polymerize and become more resonant. So perfect way to get wood to go. So when we buy wood that's old and sunk for a long time, we get the same advantage in what we have. And we didn't have to go out and just cut one tree. But the problem with irresponsible harvest is removing a tree from the ecosystem, but it's disrupting the ecosystem as well as the cultures that depend on that. And in my early career, I saw that stuff firsthand, and I promised myself we wouldn't be part of that process of deforestation or irresponsible harvest. The beautiful thing is we don't have to compromise to do that. Getting woods from reclaimed sources is obvious, but there's other ways we can do responsible harvest. And here's a great one. This is our darling Brazilian rosewood, and this is exceedingly rare because it's been super desirable since it was discovered by the Spanish hundreds of years ago when they came into South America. That's a nice piece, isn't it?
Yummy.
That's a nice piece. And this is so old. Well, I'm jumping ahead of myself. The responsible harvest of this is these trees were probably cut in the 1930s. Here's a neat secret, is Brazilian rosewood is not pretty in the living state. It's kind of pink and not very interesting, but it goes through a secondary process once it dies, and it gets all this nice inky stuff. So in the very beginning, people weren't getting rosewood trees for rosewood; they were looking for old down trees. So it makes it rare even then. So these trees that were cut so long ago, we have the benefit of the polymerization of the resins, the sugars being rinsed out of it, and it's beautiful. And we didn't cut down a tree to get it, or wreck anybody's livelihood. And as you know, it sounds spectacular. This stuff can sound like a tile when you tap on it. So there's the responsible harvest. We're actually reclaiming this from the rest of it. And it's not a rainforest timber. It grows solitary on the savanna, and which adds to its rarity too. The complications now with it being on the endangered species list and all the regulations, import, export, it's part and parcel of just being protective of the whole ecosystem. So there's one. This mahogany is a beautiful one. Mahogany is a rainforest timber. The modern harvest of it is almost all unconscionable, and what is responsible is hard to verify. Even if it's certified by a recognized agency, you better ride with it all the way through to find out where it comes from. So we don't like buying this stuff out of South America for that reason. This stuff is not plantation grown. It's sustainable yield like a Christmas tree farm. It's planted semi-annually. It grows to maturity, can be harvested, and there's ones coming up all along. And it's about an 80 to 100 year cycle. So this has actually been in the works for the last 100 years, and we're just starting to benefit from it. Your Indian rosewood is a great example of responsible harvest. This family we've dealt with for generations, and they're really protective of the resources because they like to have it in the family for generations. So here is Indian rosewood, and Matt, this is very similar to yours. You recognize the really dark look and the tight grain. Well, what it is, it's a tree that would have fallen from windfall, lightning strike, natural old age, and reclaimed from the forest floor. And it has the properties we're talking about. It's dense, it's hard, it grew slowly, and the ton of this is going to be different from this. This is the same kind of tree, same kind of wood, but this was a sustainable yield, and it's grown to shade coffee crops. How PC can you get? Again, it's planted semi-annually. It grows faster, the grains are further apart, and it has a different tone. One's not better than the other. They're just different. You can hear that nice ring to its wood. The cocobolo, we were introduced to that through hurricane blowdowns in Central America. Obviously trees that got wiped out in a hurricane, and we were able to get in the reclamation of that. That was the introduction. Since then, we've been able to find it in dead standing trees and keep that same process. So we get a lot of advantages. Now, we'll make 500 or 600 guitars this year, which is coincidentally the same amount of guitars that Taylor or Martin make. The difference is we'll take a year to do that, and they do that in one day. And so it's a different scale of building, and the reason we keep it that small is to get this quality of materials, which are a limited resource, and not the regular food chain that those guys buy from. This is Brazilian rosewood, or Dalbergia nigra's closest sister, and it's Dalbergia spruciana. And it's, I can tell at a glance that it's not Brazilian, but it has real similar color, real similar qualities, a little more towards the cocobolo. Feel how dense that is.
Wow.
Sounds like slate.
Yeah, it is. It's spectacular. It's going to be a great alternative. I didn't used to talk in terms of alternatives to Brazilian, but it's such a political hot potato now. Sure. We do, and it's stupidly expensive. It's expensive way out of proportion to anything it brings to the guitar because of the complicated harvest, etc. This stuff right now is certified. It's Forest Stewardship Council certified, means it's been responsibly handled all the way through the food chain up to us, and we can all good conscience build it into a guitar, get a Brazilian sound, and people cannot worry about having it confiscated when they go to Amsterdam. And this is our working stock right here. You can find materials, mahogany from an old boat building company. There's some woods that from a retired and a departed luthier. There's some stuff that's reclaimed from old down trees, stuff like that. And there's some stuff that's responsible harvest. So a nice mix of that. And the neat thing is we know it all where it comes from. The basic difference between us and a mass producer of guitars is we control the way it sounds. And making a guitar, you can do it like making a chair or an automobile. And if you define what all the measurements are, you then can assign machinery to specialize in making these parts exactly the same size. It can be done really efficiently. So you can make a guitar kit that then your workers can assemble in fixtures that only allow it to go one way. So it minimizes mistakes, keeps the cost and the time way down, and it goes to the marketplace quicker at a lower price, which, as we talked about, is a beautiful thing because it gets guitars in the hands of people that couldn't otherwise afford them. And no matter how cheap the guitar, it still sounds cool. You know, it's still a fun thing. You can write a song, tell a story, and it's of value. What we're doing is we're making the most sophisticated tool possible for somebody to express their creativity. It's a different story. So we're using the tradition of Luthier, and let's contrast that to the mass production. What the Luthier did, and that's not steel string guitars, that's only 100 years old. This goes back to the violin tradition. The Luthier, instead of, where it counts, instead of making a component to a dimension, they did it to frequency. And when you build your instrument, you're composing it like a chord on a piano. Rather than putting together measurements, you're putting together actual notes. And when those are in harmony, it allows sustain, that vibration lasts a long time, and it develops overtones, rich, full, colorful, desirable sound above that. And you can do that. It takes time, but you can do that. And so there's the difference. In the Luthier tradition, you're composing the instrument like carefully choosing notes on the piano according to music theory. In the assembly of pre-made components, you're throwing rocks at the piano with your eyes closed. It's random. But to be charitable here, although we control the sound of every guitar and we always get excellence in what we do, in the mass production, if you throw enough rocks at a piano, law of averages says you get a chord every once in a while. So you will get an excellent sounding guitar in mass production. You'll also get real bad sounding guitars and every variation in between. So there's the difference with what we do. You were asking the question about tone. How do I decide what's a warm tone or a bright tone or whatever? So let me show you. Here we have, these are actually the little veneers or head plates that go on the head of the guitar for decoration, but they do have inherently a tone that's specific to the woods. Tone is a quality of sound that's bright or dark, not high or low. The difference between your guitar really close to the bridge and getting a clean, bright, strident tone, or playing up over the sound while getting a warm tone. So let's go through these. Take a piece of Indian rosewood. It's clear, but it's not sharp. It has a roundness to it or a warmth to it that'll translate to the sound of the guitar. Here's our Brazilian rosewood.
Whoa.
Don't think about the high or low, but the tone.
Yeah, it's different size wood.
Yeah, it's a little more, I'm going to say complex, it's not accurate, but it's a little more interesting, but it's also got that kind of rounded quality, but a little more clarity, okay, than the India.
So it's like you have to separate pitch from...
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
The frequency, we'll manipulate that later.
Right.
So let's go into mahogany. What I'm feeling for here, by the way, is like the harmonic on a string. It's a neutral point that allows the thing to vibrate rather than deaden. And there it is. It's brighter still. Okay.
That makes me want to ask, though, when you say feeling for, because I know Joe's talked a lot about how when you're tapping these woods, part of it is hearing the sound, but part of it is how you feel it.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll go into that in some depth when we get to tuning the guitar top.
Okay.
So this is, it's just like, if you touch the 12th fret lightly, it divides it in two separate vibrational lengths, and you get the octave. It's very clean and clear and like a little bell. You move slightly off that, it doesn't change the pitch, it deadens it. and that's what I'm playing with here. So anyway, back to this. Mahogany is very desirable because it has qualities of the rosewood, the warmth, but a little bit more clarity. Is that better? No, but you're going to hear each note a little more distinctly with it because of that tone. And then let's go to this Cocobolo. It's almost like a tile. Mm-hmm. And that, though, what we've heard in the variation here is tone, and these woods will contribute that quality to the guitar. So we were talking earlier about, let's generalize, say the bluegrass player generally wants a nice warm blended tone, but as those players have got more into stepping into the lead and playing single line notes, mahogany is becoming more popular. Not more than rosewood, but it's becoming increasingly popular in bluegrass because people want to hear that. Or Eric's guitar out of Cocobolo. Beautiful for him with that clarity because you want to hear every note he plays. Here's a couple of neat pieces of wood that are native to our mountains. This is sycamore. It's very mahogany-like, and it's in its tone really resonant.